Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton, here with Brandon. We have regionals to get caught up on, as well as a JP stream where they announced some new products that are probably coming to English. It was a sword art heavy top 8 in the Philippines. 3 Alices go 1, 2, 3 with the Silica, Mother's Rosario, and Silica top ends respectively. Tokyo Avengers gets its first top with dual laners. And then filling out the rest of top 8, we have a Salvage Pants Hololive with the Chloe level 1 into the Suisei level 3, the new slime build, 8 salvage quints, and another Alice Silica Sword Art. The only thing here that I think is at all surprising is this Chloe Suisse salvage pants build. 84 players in the Philippines, so decent sized regional. I think it's pretty reflective of what the meta looks like generically, just in terms of player base and event size. But I'm really interested in this Suisse deck. It runs the Chloe level 1, which requires the Laplace level 3. Usually that's you play the choice with that. But in this case, it's only playing the Laplace as the Resonator. It's not playing the combo, and has instead completely gone on to the Suisse, which blows up and rearranges the board and also burns 2. Very anti-Alice, very anti-Slime. It's got 4 copies of a level 2 killer that gets up to 12, 13, 14 with support. This is another one of those Hololive piles that I look at it first and I go, how did this top? And then I look at it for 15 more minutes and I go, I actually really like this list.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because I think this is very much kind of that anti-meta trying to do what it needs to do, right? It's seeing the big, massive influx of sword art, especially in this regional, and saying that it wants to rearrange the board, move it around it too. So it tries to stop Alice in its tracks. It runs pretty heavy on that anti-level 2 tech, so it's very much trying to combat a lot of that. And then has the flexibility of changing that into then turning that into a finishing top end. So it's like if it can remove the board, rearrange it, force my opponent to struggle for resources for a minute, and then turn around and end the game. Yeah, I think that's exactly what this deck's trying to do.
But at the same time, as much as it's anti-meta, like it's designed to go into these board-heavy level 2 boards with Alice and Slime specifically. But in addition, it also is just a competent top end. Like pay 1, pitch 1, burn 2 is very, very vanilla, but it's something, and you can get there. It's not impossible to get there, and you get this down at level 2, right? So you can start burning your opponent with this pants combo at level 2. It heals. You've got early play healers in this. It's built for a couple of specific matchups, but it can handle most games. It's not like some other, like the Beaufrey deck that we saw a couple years ago that just took down Dal. Kind of only could really play into Dal. It didn't have a whole lot else to deal with, more generic matchups, but this, I think, answers those a little bit better. So it's in a decent spot. I think that this is a pretty good list. And it's, again, just further evidence that the good stuff in the meta is typically answerable if you, read more cards. Hololive is it's just full of all of these crazy profiles. Like this plays 4 level 2 killers because level 2 killers are good cards, especially in this current meta. I like to see something a little more creative that deals with the stuff that's currently dominating these events. And in New York, it was exactly those sets dominating the event. Slime goes 1, 2, 3. Sword Art in 4th with Alice into Silica. But looking at the top finisher, this is Riaz's build. Leave it to Riaz to do something just a little bit different from everybody else. The level 3 combo, he runs 2 of the Benimaru, but he also runs 2 of the Wind top end from set 1. The one that has pay 2, burn 2, but also can summon copies of itself to the board.
So effectively what this combo does is it brings it on board cheaper, but it also can cantrip on play, so you can also kind of like draw into some pieces that you need to. So you could draw into, say, Climax, or you could draw into another copy of itself, so you don't have to rely on having a significant amount of cards in hand for that.
And you were on this for a while. I remember you playing this with the Shizu level 1 and having some success with it.
Yeah, that's the top end that I had when I went fourth in Chicago. I definitely see where he's going at with this combo and having the ability to, realistically, because you're on 6 different pants, to play into this relatively effectively.
Yeah, and I think that having the extra pants trigger really helps because you do need the selectivity to get to one of your 2 wins. The win trigger also doesn't feel terrible right now all the time. Like there are times and places when triggering wind is actually pretty nice because you've got all the standby stuff running around, like all these big things come to the board that frankly Slime doesn't deal with super well outside of just getting its level 2 combo on board. So hitting a wind when there's a board full of Alice and you're still at level 1 probably doesn't feel too bad.
Realistically, probably playing it into the mirror is actually probably really nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because the first person to get the level 2 pants combo down will have the advantage on that on the board in that spot.
You wind away the back row support, and all of a sudden it loses 2k power across the board.
So yeah, definitely some stuff there. Definitely something interesting to look at. The rest of top 8, our first Overlord into top 8. It is the salvage bar list that we kind of expected to see, but realistically, I think the vast majority of people expected to see this more, and I think that what we're seeing here is one of these situations where people look at a deck and they go, yeah, a deck that you expect to see because, oh, it's good, so I have to be ready for it. And then you get ready for it, and then you don't really see it. Because we didn't see it much in Chicago. I just don't think people are playing Overlord. At least not as much as we expected them to.
I do agree that it probably has a very small representation rate. I also think it takes some. It has a pretty high player skill intro level, whereas some of the other decks maybe not so much. Some of the decks kind of play themselves. This one you kind of have to very much be in a spot to know the right timings and the right pieces and the right moments to play different cards. So it definitely requires a lot of player input along the way.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Because behind the scenes, we've had lots of conversations about this deck. And I've looked at this deck and I think, okay, it's got the burns, it's got the board that can't be touched, it's got all these things. It's good. Top 5 kind of deck, definitely something that could compete at the highest level. You have not liked this deck. Like, you haven't really talked about it much on the channel, but behind the scenes, we've had multiple conversations, and you don't like this deck. But we've seen some tournaments now where Overlord's been legal, and it hasn't done much. Why might those reasons that you don't like it be part of the reason why it's not having as much success as it is?
I think it's a little fragile in the mid game, and that fragile part of it can really be taken advantage by a lot of the different decks that are currently available. Like, it's trying to sit at 2 for an extra turn that it may or may not get.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's trying to almost a little too much in the mid game. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily going to have the time for that with some of the speed of some of the decks that it's currently being played and that are currently popularized. So it's like, it's a difficult pick to bring in. Jason, who was able to bring this deck to top 8, did a really good job playing through Swiss, and his only losses were to Slime.
And that's where I think, going back to what you were saying about player skill, right? Like, it took someone with Jason's skill, obviously Jason's one of the named players, someone that's well known as a good player.
Yeah, attached with Strictly Broken, yeah.
And he had to play this and play it well to get this deck to reach its full potential. So it almost feels like this is a deck where it's not going to have super high representation because of its kind of difficulty level, but then once you get into top 8, once you're into round 6, if you're playing into Overlord that late in an event and you're like pushing for top, that person probably has Overlord sorted out. But if you're running into Overlord in the first 4 rounds of a tournament, you're far more likely to maybe have an advantage because of like that fragility in the middle, especially with these decks that push so much damage, right? When I played into Overlord, played this Hololive versus Overlord matchup several times back when we were doing prep for Chicago. It felt like Hololive just kind of bullied Overlord just because Overlord couldn't handle all the damage being thrown at it. And that kind of feels like its weakness, right? Especially if you can hold up an anti-change counter and you force them to side into a board full of ones on the turn that they have their, their Ein's down, because you can deal with the Ein's. It's the only way you can deal with the Ein's, so you have to be there, but you can deal with it. So like if you're at 2 and they're at 2 and they've got the Ein's down and you can have the anti-change up, then forcing them to side for an entire turn, that's a lot of damage they're losing. And it's damage they're not going to make up until they get to the very end, and if you can kill them before they get their endgame popped off, that's it. It's an interesting matchup, but my initial impressions on Overlord were that it was going to be much more competitive than it has been. And I think for the reasons that we've talked about, it might have been overrated. Like, I'm coming around to your side on this. I think you were right in your assessment that Overlord was overrated when it dropped. And props to Jason, right? Like, if anything, this is, more of a recognition of his ability, because he took this deck that, hasn't had results into top 8. But I don't know how much Overlord we're going to see going forward, because I don't know if Overlord can just handle the damage rush.
I think we may see another Overlord or two throughout the season, but I do not think we're going to see near the representation that we are seeing of Slime or SAO.
Rounding out top 8, we had a standby Meliodas, which I think is a good anti-meta call, if anything, because more and more decks are not playing the blinkers and the board blow-up kind of stuff that can actually affect Meliodas. So it made sense to kind of lean back into the stuff that people aren't teching answers for the way they used to, because people used to have a tech card for Meliodas just to try to deal with it specifically. Now they don't, and you can take advantage of that, and I think that's what happened here. And then we had one more Slime and one more Quince. So moving on to the Costa Rica Regional, 23 players. This one was not without controversy. Overlord won the event, the standard salvage bar list that we see the Time Machine level 1 into the Irons level 3. Problem, Overlord 2 was technically not legal for this event, and somehow nobody caught it until after the event was over.
The person that played it did mention that they talked to the head judge and the other judges and got the okay from them.
This is definitely a massive failure on Bushiroad's part. There's no other way around it. You have got to, as the people in charge of the event, know what is and is not legal. They checked with 6 judges and got the okay from 6 judges at the event to play this. No shade at the person who won with this deck. They registered with a deck that the judges told them was legal and the Bushiroad Facebook page said was legal. This should not have been an issue. This should have been caught way before it actually was. When I'm preparing for an event, I prepare based on what's legal for the event. If something isn't legal at an event, I'm not going to prepare for it. So if you walk in the door with your deck that you've tuned for a meta that doesn't include something powerful, and then you sit down across from it, that's an issue, right? Like, that would be that's not ideal. So again, no shade at the player who won with this, but come on, guys, you got to be better about this stuff. You have an app now. You have a whole system in place where people have to pre-register their decks, and this is something Avis pointed out on Twitter. You have a whole system that allows you to pre-register and pre-approve decks. This is a 23-player event. This is not a big event. And they couldn't handle that, and that's really upsetting. That shouldn't happen at any level. However, Bushiroad is, it sounds like, going to honor the Worlds invite. So they should be allowed to play at Worlds. They earned their spot based on the floor rules of the day, even though the floor rules of the day were not the ones that were supposed to be there. Got to be better.
That being said, there were a list of decks that were not allowed at that regional. A lot of them include many of the decks that have been topping to this point. So with that in mind, this regional looks a little different, right? Because we did have Overlord win it all. With the salvage bar list that we've been expecting to see and kind of saw previous regionals as well. Followed in second place, we have Dal, the 8th standby build. Keep in mind, Dal 2 is not legal, so this is actually only set 1 and the extra booster.
But yeah, looking at the rest of the top 8 list, kind of a throwback meta, really, in a lot of ways. We see an Escanor in 3rd, Avatar, the salvage into the Zuko top end in 4th, a pair of Kageyas in 5th through 8th. It says 2 soul choice. We don't have the list yet. Presumably that's the set 1 choice, which would make this kind of like a Chica waifu build. And then we have the standby salvage, the more traditional, older Kaguya build, Don Machi, and 8 standby Quince. So definitely a different kind of a meta, and I don't want to overstate the importance of Overlord's win in this meta, because one, wasn't technically allowed in this meta. Although I guess it technically was allowed in this meta. But also, it's not playing into any of the stuff that's going to, compete with it. There's no Hololive here. There's no Alice here. The Quince list doesn't have all of its pieces. So I don't think anyone can point to this and say, hey, look, Overlord won an event. We got to keep that in mind. Overlord's still with a pretty underwhelming first couple of weekends. Obviously, a lot of Weiss still to be played this season. But I think Overlord has not shown out as much as maybe some people, including myself, expected it to. Big weekend coming up because you have the Sydney Regional, the BC Regional, and the Netherlands Regional all on October 22nd. I think that's going to tell us a lot more. So yeah, but looking at this last couple of weeks, suspicious lack of Gura. Do you think people are figuring out how to play into Gura? Or do you think this is just like a low week for a deck that's going to roar back into relevance next weekend?
So one of the big things with ASCII Gura is, as powerful as the deck can be, it also has that ability to be fragile too. It does require quite a few things to happen and happen well. And also, realistically, it kind of depends on having a few cancels throughout the game as well on your side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If ASCII Gura gets rushed, then it just loses. I agree.
And I think it doesn't... We're seeing that deck still be able to kind of complete its endgame, but its endgame is usually trying to push from outside of its realistically threatenable space. So it's not actually able to close the game when it gets to level 3. And so it's trying to slow the game down slightly to be able to do that, and it's not effective because everybody else has that same kind of push when we get to that end game too.
Even a good 3-point shooter only hits 40% of their threes, and it feels like ASCII Gura specifically is trying to kill from so far out that sometimes it's just putting too much strain on itself to try to get there. Yeah, you have 3 Guras down, but can you kill from 2-0 with Gura? You can, but you're only going to do it 30% of the time.
I think it definitely brings into consideration and questioning about its reliability and its consistency. If it's able to reliably get to that point in that kind of threatenable space, or if it has the consistency to pull off triple Gura in every matchup.
And that's where, I'm going to fall back on, that's why I like the choice combo at 1. Is because you can push the damage early, you can push them into 3 first, and you're at 2-2. And then you look at them having had, they've had 1 less turn to get ready. So they're missing the resources for their, board destroying, damage inducing combo. And they have to kill you from 2-2. So I still think that that's the way to go when playing the Gura list. But in any case, something else that's worth noting here, kind of going back to what we talked about last time, neither you nor I really enjoy a lot of what's happening in the meta right now in terms of what cards are good and what decks are good. But it is balanced. We're looking around here at a meta where, Slime is really good, Sword Art's really good, Hololive is still definitely very good, Quince is still definitely viable. And, the jury may still be out on things like Overlord and Avatar, but, we have at least 3 or 4 decks that are very good. And I know that we have, there's always talk about bannings and all that stuff. There's always going to be chatter about whether things should or shouldn't be banned. But Bushiroad better be careful, because if they do that JP ban in English, the English metagame is dead for 12 months. If they hit Overlord and Gura specifically, and Alice, and don't touch Slime, then the whole meta is going to be Slime for the foreseeable future. So they better be careful if they're going to do any more bans. We don't know anything about that. They haven't announced anything or anything like that. But it's been a second since there's been a ban. If their trigger finger is getting a little itchy on the ban button, they better be really, really careful, because even if this meta is wonky, it's at least balanced. And if they're going to maintain that, they need to kind of let some things go for a while and let the meta sit. Or else it's going to become both egregiously powerful and super toxic.
To kind of piggyback off of that, we expect that we're going to be hearing from Bushiroad probably sometime this month with a kind of fall English conference stream like we've had in years past. So we kind of expect that to be coming up, in part because we've also kind of run out of releases that are going to have dates with them, right? Because we just got the new date for Licorice Recoil.
That will come out March 22nd, 2024. The whole 9 yards, trial deck, booster, etc. They did just have a JP stream where they announced some new products for JP specifically, some of which we expect we will get in English. There's going to be more Bunny Girl in JP. Wouldn't be surprised to see that in English at all. Quince 4, because why not? The thing that I'm most excited about is the Hololive Premium set, because it looks like it's kind of like the Power Up set. It actually has the same rarity PS as the Power Up sets. There's one for each of the 4 Hololive Weiss Schwarz ambassadors, which is pretty cool. One of whom is Kiara from EN. It comes with a pre-structured deck, so kind of like a trial deck kind of a thing, as opposed to just a handful of selected cards like there was in the power-up sets. It comes with a couple PRs, comes with sleeves, a deck box, and a storage box. The power-up sets, when they came to English, were a little bit different. We didn't get sleeves. We got a top loader instead. But this sounds like the kind of product that would absolutely come to English and would absolutely sell well in English. So I'm hopeful that we get this, if only so I can finally get a Hololive deck box without having to pay $50 in the secondary market for one. But yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing that's coming to English. Looking at the JP Weiss schedule, yeah, this is a little bit different. Lots of stuff on here that is very likely to come to English, as well as some stuff that definitely could. Bocce the Rock, that's coming to English, right? We're both in agreement that that's just coming to English. That's going to happen.
I would expect this in the next announcement, yeah.
Bang Dream My Go. It's Bang Dream. We usually get Bang Dream. Wouldn't be surprised at all. Bang Dream has to get a shot in the arm every year or so, because it always has to be relevant, and honestly, good for it. Alice Gear Aegis is a maybe. Shakugan no Shana is a maybe. There's always the question mark of, will we ever get more Love Live stuff? There's more Love Live stuff on the calendar in JP. Oshinoko, I would really expect it. There are so many people who want that, so I imagine we'll get that. And then obviously Quint, Abuta, and the Hololive Premium set featuring the ambassadors. I think those are going to be all, at the very least, likely, if not locks. Kind of those like 6 are pretty much locks, with a couple of definitely maybes in there. You were saying that Suso no Frieren, which I know nothing about, is apparently getting some buzz. There's always the possibility of something like a Macross Delta, which would be hilarious. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff that is on the horizon in JP that could make its way to English. But for now, the English schedule is updated through March. Only about 5 more months worth of stuff. So, we're kind of, we still don't really know a lot of what's happening in 2024. At least it hasn't been confirmed. Although I feel pretty confident that we can make some pretty educated guesses. So prepare your wallets well, because I think we have a pretty good idea of what's coming out in most of 2024. I believe that is it for us. We'll be back on Thursday with 5 cards, 5 minutes. Next week, Brandon will have a deck tech. We'll have gameplay for that the following Thursday. And in 2 weeks, talking about more stuff. Maybe there will be an English conference stream to talk about. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And have a good one.
We'll see you then.